Thanks again for joining the FreightWaves Sales and Marketing Summit today on FreightWaves TV. I'm Charley Dehoney, currently serving as president of FitSmart Great Plains, a freight brokerage company based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm here today with one of my absolute favorite freight tech people that I've ever known in my entire life, John Rapp. This is an honor for me and a privilege to be able to talk to John about the evolution of his career. John and I crossed paths in a former business I was involved with. And I was able to identify at a very young age that John was somebody who was going to be on the fast track. And so super proud to be able to say that I worked with John. And this is my Lion King moment where this is the circle of life right here. So I've been watching this all day in preparation, John. Really excited to be talking today. From the time we met on the phone, it was super clear that we were both passionate and enthusiastic about logistics and sales and technology, and then watching your evolution over the last few years in your career has just been mind-blowing to go from somebody who at one point I was mentoring and now somebody that I look up to as an absolute mentor of my own. So John Rapp, thank you for being here today. Please introduce yourself to the group.
Yeah, that you're being too kind also. Like, I'm definitely not mentor status. So I'm John Rapp. I work for a company called Airspace Technologies that is headquartered in Carlsbad, California. We're a time-critical transportation group. We focus in the next flight out and express courier service. We move things like aircraft parts, human organs, a lot of COVID tests right now, as well as a bunch of blood and tissue samples for research throughout the greater U.S. and now the world. We are global as of this year. So
that's awesome, John. As a native Tennessean, tell the folks kind of how you ended up in logistics and supply chain. And kind of walk us through what you've done leading up to your current role as Vice President of Sales at Airspace.
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I crossed paths with a logistics sales rep for Access America when I was working in a retail store, and he told me that my skills should be in logistics. So he asked me for my resume. I gave him my resume. Shout out to John Lawrence if he's watching. Now the director of sales elsewhere, but that's how I got connected. So interviewed at Access America, went into the brokerage, Cradle to Grave world, was with them for a year or so before they got acquired by Coyote, had my book of business wiped out and restarted again. So second iteration of logistics brokerage world. Then when we launched an operations team in Chattanooga, I saw that as a career path. Interviewed, was selected to be operations manager, then eventually senior operations manager. Coyote got acquired by UPS. At that point, it for a lot of us, it was a little bit of a writing on the wall. Just career progression within that large of an organization was going to be difficult. So went off to the side to try to start another brokerage company with Craig Fuller, actually, pre-FreightWaves. And then after about 10 or so months, my wife and I decided to go traveling. We came back. Somehow got connected to Charley through a great recruiter, and then Charley called me, interviewed me in person the next day because I was in California, and brought me to Airspace, where he really helped me set up a career from sales rep, director of sales, and now vice president.
This is so gratifying just to be able to reflect back, because we don't do that enough in our industry because we're all in the weeds and drinking from the fire hose constantly. But I think that journey that you just described in terms of from the time we met till the time you got the offer, that took some time. And if you remember back, originally you saw yourself as an operator.
I remember.
And we originally brought you in for the director of operations role. You made it to the final round of interviews, and we ended up going with a different candidate who I also think didn't work out. I can't remember. But but the reality is but the reality is we stayed in touch, and it was clear to me that you were going to find your way in logistics technology, and that you really wanted to migrate over to the tech side of the business, and you had the right brain and the right mindset. And if I remember correctly, you interviewed with everybody under the sun for operator roles. And ultimately you called me back and you said, hey, I think I'm going to take a sales role with a company that we won't bring up. And I decided, you know what, man, if you're going to go do sales for them, you need to come do sales for us. And what was that transition like in your mind from, I'm an operator, I'm going to be a COO someday, which we all believe that you were capable of doing. But in that business at that time, that wasn't the right fit. But we had so many other open doors for you, but you had some discipline behind you and you were really, really focused on finding the right role. So walk me through what that progression was like mentally to go from career path of an operator to the revenue side of the business.
Yeah, that's a really good
Brought
question.
to you by Yeti today.
Yeah, that's right. Brought to you by Yeti. I think that it came down to what the eventual path would lead to, right? So looking at the career path of operations and the career path of sales, and operations most frequently is going to top out around the COO point. And I think that at the core of it, there's some form or function of entrepreneurial spirit where, like, I think I would like to run a company at some point. And I think that that path made more sense through the sales experience and applying that for a long period of time, learning the customer, learning how to build a team, building teams, then building a company, learning the product fit. All of that comes more so from the sales engine of a company than the operation side. And I think that functionally became the big split for me in looking at a career path, and like long term and short term.
That's awesome. And I think it's encouraging for a lot of the people that are out there right now that are probably sitting in an operator desk, but maybe enjoy talking to the customer. And look, I mean, these forums are about developing and getting better and expanding your vision. And I think that's one thing that was very clear from the get-go, even as a very young person. It was clear that you had a vision for where you felt like you could contribute, as well as where you thought the industry was going to go. And so kind of moving forward, as you joined and you started as a salesperson, what were some of your like first concerns, and what were some of the like mental roadblocks that you kind of had to get over as a contributor to really unlock that performance that you've been able to generate?
It's a good question. I think the pride, I'm going to hammer on this as much as I can because I feel like sales reps, we get in our own way most of the time.
I
Because
think most
like
people do.
what was that?
I think most people do.
Yeah, so it's like you expect to be a high performer, you position yourself when you're interviewing as a high performer. Everything is about what you can do. And for me, especially coming over to aerospace from a truckload world to like an envelope sized item, it's not the same. So just the immediate hurdle is just you have to ask for help all the time, which is just not very validating or like self-gratifying because you're just saying like, I don't know, can you help? I don't know all of the time. But knowing that you have this skill or at least the drive to apply the knowledge you're given to the eventual customer in X many of days, X many of months, I think was the immediate and probably the biggest hurdle most sales rep that I've encountered run into is just getting the help and the foundation when they first get there, and then you let them run. Right now you've equipped them and they're able to go, but if you don't equip them first, they're going to spin for a while. So I would say like that was pretty much it. And then having leaders that want to invest, pull you aside, listen to your calls, listen to like are on your calls with you, are able to give you, fine tuning points. That also is, I think, key to my development. So like having, and this is not by any means just you, but every leader that I've worked under has given me feedback and enabled me to grow versus letting me run and not being a part of it.
And I think there's a couple themes in there that, just to kind of highlight that I think are worth noting is number one, getting into sales and evolving into sales, it teaches you how to listen, right? You got to listen to the voice of the customer. You've got to be humble enough to stop talking, start listening. And sometimes, whether it's the customer or leadership, you're going to need to hear things that you don't want to hear. And I think that core tenet, the connection between listening and humility, cascades into all areas of life as a husband, as a father, as a community leader, certainly as an entrepreneur, and you continue to go out and people aren't sometimes picking up what you're putting down, and you need to really just be able to self-reflect, think about what those folks said, take the takeaways that you can get out of those, and remain humble without beating yourself up to the point where you want to quit or give up. And so I think that's the delicate balance. And I think that quiet confidence that you had coming in as an athlete and really just like as a student of the game really helped you evolve quickly and separate yourself as a top performer in the organization, which is, no question why you're running the sales force right now. And so I think one of the things that we should probably really dive into now is like, you came in, we gave you your first sales job. Quickly, within 12 or 18 months, you were looking after one of our core verticals that was critical for our success. And we trusted you to go out in the world and turn a bunch of doorknobs and find a bunch of opportunities that we knew you were uniquely suited to address. But what I love about your background, John, and your evolution is that you didn't stop there, right? You didn't say, hey, I'm a recovering broker that's now selling into the 3PL space. You took from that what you could, and you continue to grow and scale yourself so that you can then be additive to the rest of the organization. So I know you're an avid reader, and I know that you never sit still, which is part of the reason why you're able to just churn through a lot of things. But maybe aside from the obvious, read a lot of books and do a lot of stuff, walk people through, how do you evolve? Like, how do you scale yourself from an individual contributor to then thinking more strategically and being more generous and giving with yourself to others and acting as a servant in your new leadership role?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think that I'll start with the involvement point, which is kind of something that I care a lot about, is the collaboration between the team outside of the leaders, right? And I think that that's where the involvement starts. I think that's where mine started before I led the sales team. I spent a lot of time trying to learn from them because most of them had been there longer than I did. So I positioned myself in a let me learn from you point. And then as the team grows, you naturally get built up if you're at a point where you're also saying, hey, let me help you. So I think that for my team right now, I have too many direct reports. It's a lot, but they're all right now starting to take a lot of my role and make it their own. So a few people have stepped up, and I'll hop off our calls early and just name someone, and then they will take a theme, and they're just evolving, to use your word, into a leader without the power, there's no promotion, there's no anything. It's just kind of gravitating towards it and seeing. I think it also comes with seeing where improvement can be made, not asking anything for it, but actually addressing it. And then people see that, when you have a problem and it goes away, you immediately know who took it off your plate, right? So I think that that's the simplest thing. And I would encourage people to do is just, there's always something broken, and it can be big or small, but if you just take it, own it, and then change it, it will be noticed. And that's a point also for you to choose, right? Do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy being the person that owns the project, that owns the performance of the team or the rollout of something? It's a good way to test the waters to see if your path is a VP level contributor or a VP level team leader. And almost all the time that's available on the outside, and it's just gravitating towards it.
Yeah, I think I could go on for hours about some of the things that you just said, because I think the real kind of key takeaways there is that as a leader, you've got to leave room for others to also evolve and continue to grow and develop. And if you're there and all you're doing is all the work and you're just a glorified sales rep, ultimately you're blacking out the sun from those underneath you, and they don't have the nutrients that they need to continue to grow. And I think of all of the growth that you guys have seen at Airspace and all of the development inside the organization and going from a domestic company to a global company and really scaling yourselves, it's clear that there's a culture of growth inside the organization. And certainly from my days there, that was one of the key things that we wanted to really just develop and nurture and allow to flourish. And I think the leadership team and certainly the board have done a fantastic job of complementing, the folks that are already on the team with new voices and new vision. But I think it's equally as encouraging to see somebody like yourself really go through every single level of the organization. And then when you arrive, at your destination where you are now, you still have the humility to sit and listen. So, what are some of the things that you learned as a leader from the people that, technically report to you, but are candidly probably 10 times better than you at certain things? What are the areas that you decide hey, that's not my jam. My people are way better at that than me, and I can help them in this? Because I think the decision between strategic and tactical is something that a lot of leaders struggle with. So how are you balancing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I don't have it really well balanced right now. But some of the things that I think and even this is within the past couple of weeks, have presented themselves is when a team member brings, this would be an iteration over a year ago. So when a team member brings an idea, and this is a bad management tactic that I had intuited, I would bring it up as an idea. But what I've learned with having too much on my plate, which is like encouraging some good leadership approaches, is just get on a call, have them there, and then pass the buck and get off the call. So, like, I know that you know this better than I do. I know that you discovered this thing. Teach other people. Like, I don't need to know that. To your point, it's tactical. It's outreach. It's Salesforce. It's an email campaign. It's a conversation you had with a customer and how they responded. Let them share that, because that will, to your point, that enables the team to put them into a position of leadership for them to take on the responsibility versus taking the idea and running with it as your own, so you can stake a flag in something else and say, look what I did. I think that's probably the easiest one, is the moment you see it, don't even think about it. If you didn't know it, have that person own it. Just leave it right there. That's been one of my biggest things, I think.
Well, that's awesome, and I mean, it just shows sincere growth, because a lot of times in contributor roles, you're looking to your left, you're looking to your right, and you're measuring yourself against your peers, and it's tempting, right? When you see an innovation, you see an advancement, you want to like steal or borrow, and then if you get the opportunity maybe to claim it as your own, like that's a natural, I think, instinct for a lot of people. But I think one of the things that it brought to mind as you were just speaking was, as a leader, like you're oftentimes a connector, right? It's hey, this person is born to do this and you're struggling. So you two get after it, and I don't need to be in the room, right? But it's a delicate balance, because as a contributor, you want credit for everything, right? And you want to build your brand, and you want to grow, and you want to separate yourself and everything else. And then as a leader, you really just got to like quell that and say like, look, that's not my role anymore. My role is to lift the entire organization. And I think that takes a certain discipline. It certainly takes humility. And I think along with that humility, it takes like an internal confidence, right? Where you're like, I know what I am and I know what I'm good at. And I'm going to be excellent at other areas that other people aren't excellent at. And there's probably going to be some things that nobody else wants to do that I'm willing to do that will kind of help me continue to, grow and develop my overall group. But I think, as much as you're a connector as a leader, you also have to be a filter, right? Because you can't just let your team proliferate all of their ideas, because some of them suck, right? And so I think you need to be very, very candid. And one of the things that you and I used to connect with a lot, and part of what I really miss about working with you, is like the idea sharing and the knowledge transfer. And hey, have you read this book yet? And we used to do all of our one-on-ones walking, because it would get our minds going. And oftentimes we'd end up like pulling up books on our phone and sharing excerpts of that. And it just brought to my mind like the book Radical Candor that you and I really connected on. And I think candor is like one of those things as a leader, you just have to put it out there. So with a couple minutes left here, why don't you talk about like what that feels like the first time you have to tell somebody something that they do not want to hear, but you desperately know they need to hear?
Yeah, I think that we'll keep it snap because we do have a couple minutes. The main thing I would say is you have to build up a repository of positives. So like you need to have built up this person beforehand, and it's like the 3-to-1 or the 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio, that concept where like you can't, the first month I have a rep, I'm probably not going to hit them negatively with anything, because I need to build trust with them. I need to build their confidence with me. And I'm the whole time that I have that, I'm going to be like, hey, when you do something that's X, I'm going to respond like Y. I just want you to know that, so that when it comes up, they already knew it. They knew I was going to bring it up to them directly, and then we were going to move forward. So I think setting the expectation while building them up enables you to, when it happens, hop in, hit the nail on the head, and move forward. I think it's incredibly important to communicate that style before you do it, though, so it's not a surprise when it happens.
John, it's been such a pleasure, man, just watching your evolution, as a young salesperson now into a VP of one of the hottest companies in logistics tech. I couldn't be more proud to be part of your story, man. I sincerely appreciate you taking some time to share this. I think there's going to be thousands of young people out there across the country and the world that could benefit from this. So thank you so much, John, and keep grinding, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.